U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is on his first official visit to Israel. Rubio held talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that included Donald Trump's proposal to relocate Gaza's Palestinian population. Netanyahu appeared to endorse the plan, which many states around the world have condemned, and critics say would amount to ethnic cleansing.
Secretary Rubio, my dear friend Marco.
A tactile and warm welcome to the new U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on his first visit to the Middle East as part of the new Trump administration. Rubio arrived in Israel on Saturday evening before meeting with Israel's president as well as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday. Speaking following their meeting, Rubio and Netanyahu declared that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon and blamed Tehran for the widespread violence across the region. They also expressed their support for Trump's controversial plan for Gaza that would effectively force 2 million Palestinians to leave.
The president's also been very bold about his view of what the future for Gaza should be. Not the same tired ideas of the past, but something that's bold and something that frankly took courage and vision in order to outline. And it may have shocked and surprised many, but what cannot continue is the same cycle where we repeat over and over again and wind up in the exact same place.
Netanyahu once again promised retribution if all hostages are not freed under the current ceasefire deal.
President Trump and I are working in full cooperation and coordination between us. We have a common strategy, and we can't always share the details of this strategy with the public, including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them.
The Israeli Defense Ministry, who released this footage, says heavy bombs made by the US were delivered to Israel ahead of Rubio's visit. They have been authorized by President Donald Trump after being banned by former President Joe Biden.
For more, I am joined now by Giorgio Cafiero, a Middle East analyst and the CEO of Gulf State Analytics, a geopolitical risk consulting firm. Giorgio, after what we've seen at this meeting, how fragile is the ceasefire with Hamas at this point?
Well, I think the ceasefire, ever since its implementation, has always been extremely fragile. It's even more so now, I believe, because of Marco Rubio's recent meeting in Israel with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You know, if you're going to try to see this from Gaza's perspective or from Hamas's perspective, you have to question what is the motivation for continuing through the remainder of phase 1 and into phases 2 and 3 of this ceasefire if the ultimate goal is a mass ethnic cleansing campaign of Gaza, in which more than 2 million Palestinians are forced into Egypt, Jordan, and perhaps other Arab countries. So it is reassuring to hear Witkoff say that he's confident that phase 2 will begin. But again, I think what Rubio is saying, and also many things that Trump has said, give us good reason to worry about the future of the ceasefire.
Right, Ed Rubio also called, we should say, for Hamas to be eradicated. That has to be a sign. The U.S. and Israel seem to be aligned on this plan to remove Palestinians from Gaza, but that plan would depend on neighboring states taking them in. Can the U.S. convince Egypt or Jordan to do that?
I don't think that's possible, and I don't think even the threat of withholding U.S. aid to Egypt and Jordan is going to make it possible. It's very important for your viewers to appreciate the fact that if the leadership in Egypt or Jordan were to ever agree to such an arrangement, that would be seen from an Arab perspective as those regimes being totally complicit with a Nakba 2.0. That would fuel a tremendous amount of chaos in those countries, a lot of unrest and instability. It could easily bring down the leaders in Cairo and Amman. Agreeing to a plan like that would amount to political suicide. these governments in Egypt and Jordan are very much focused on their own survival. And within that context, I just cannot imagine either of those governments agreeing to such a deranged plan.
Let's move our perspective now a little bit north to Iran, because intelligence sources observing these meetings, they're saying Israel wants to attack Iran's nuclear facilities with U.S. backing. How likely is that looking?
Well, I think it's really clear that the Trump administration and Netanyahu's government agree that Iran should not be able to have a nuclear weapon. I think there is some disagreement between the two sides, however, when it comes to some other issues related to Iran. I think that the Trump administration has made it quite clear that its preference is to negotiate a new nuclear deal with Tehran, one that would restrict the Iranian nuclear program even more than the 2015 JCPOA ever did. Whether that is going to be possible or not, that might be for another discussion. But we do know that what Trump has said and what others in his administration have said is that the goal is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and to do that diplomatically. That is the preference of the White House. I also think the Israeli leadership is very committed to regime change in Iran. I don't think the Trump team has any interest in carrying out some foreign orchestrated regime change plot in Iran. Their focus is not on toppling the Islamic Republic, but just making sure it never gets a nuclear weapon. So when it comes to Iran, I do see some differences between the White House and Israel's government.
Giorgio Cafiero, Middle East analyst, thanks for your insights.
Good to be with you.
I'm joined now in the studio by our Middle East analyst, Shani Rozanes. Shani, Rubio saying courage and vision in Trump's plan. What's Israel's take on the plan?
Well, of course, Netanyahu cannot do anything but align himself with Trump's plan. And of course, for the right-wing extremists in the government, this is the fulfillment of all their dreams, thinking about American administration backing displacement, relocation, mass expulsion of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. So, there is a lot of support on the surface. But if you talk to people in the military, in the Shin Bet, in the Mossad, people who are working very closely with allies in the region and in the world, they understand that this is a very tricky plan. And it's not really much of a plan. It's a wild idea that nobody actually knows the in and outs of how to make it happen, even if it was somewhat, which is not, legitimate or feasible. It's not. I mean, it's just an idea that is questionable in its legality and its ethical and standards, but it's also not very much practical. And now Israel tries to toe the line between these two things, somehow to not insult Trump, but also try to find other solutions or other ways out into making her goals for this war somehow fulfilled.
I mean, you talk about it not being feasible. How is Trump's talk impacting the ceasefire?
Well, this is exactly the problem we are in. The deal is such that while we are seeing these weekly installments of releases, the two sides should have already started last week to discuss the next phases of how to bring the release of all of the hostages. And the fear is that one affects the other in the sense that if the negotiations for the second phase are not going smoothly enough, the release of hostages that is still planned with the first phase will be stopped. And this is exactly the fear in Israel. Many in Israel were shocked and horrored to see the release last week of the men, 3 men that were very frail and obviously had gone through a lot in the almost 500 days they were in captivity. And the fear among the hostages' family and in the wide audience in Israel is such that they understand these days are numbers for the hostages and a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. But it always takes, in order to bring everybody home, Netanyahu will have to agree to the end of the war. And this is something he is not yet ready to do.
Now, speaking regionally, Rubio also said to Netanyahu that Iran is the, quote, single greatest source of instability in the region. How will the U.S. and Israel address this? What does he mean by that?
Well, that's a big question. And the feel was that when Trump gets what he wants, before the Gaza plan was even implemented, we were talking about bringing the Saudis and having a deal with the Saudis, also in an attempt to weaken the Iranians, which have gotten a very big blow to their strategy during the summer when Lebanon and Hezbollah, ceasefire took place and so on. Trump says he wants to apply maximum pressure on Iran, but at the same time, he has also said he's open to renegotiate another nuclear Iran deal. So many mixed messages from Trump there, and Netanyahu. He would like to see American backing, being able to have military operation on Iranian grounds, but I think no side is yet there because Gaza is still the first and foremost topic that needs to be cleared out of the way before moving on strongly on Iran.
Very interesting times, and like you said, many mixed messages, and we're just a few weeks in. Shani Rozanes, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Melissa.